Hi, I am Bernie Beitman. I'm a psychiatrist. I study meaningful coincidences, and I've studied them for much of my life, not really on purpose, at least at the beginning, but they happen to me with some regularity. I've written two previous books on meaningful coincidences, uh, one called Meaningful Coincidence, and the other one called Connecting with Coincidence. This one, Life-Changing Synchronicities, which I am going to be talking a bit about today, is a biography, an autobiography told through meaningful coincidences. And you may wonder why I use the term meaningful coincidences. Many people have criticized me for using that term. They prefer synchronicity, others who prefer serendipity. Meaningful coincidence is an umbrella term for both synchronicity and serendipity. Those terms are ambiguously defined. Synchronicity tends to be about personal or in spiritual development, where serendipity tends to be about finding something that's useful for you in kind of a lucky way. Happy accidents, they're often thought about, but there's an overlap between the two. My life has been an overlap of synchronicities and serendipities with a one key variation on the theme. Simulpathity is the term I gave to an experience of feeling the pain of a loved one at a distance. That is a kind of telepathy, because telepathy in its original definition was tele at a distance and pathy feeling, but then it became more cognitive. And in this talk, I'll describe a profound experience for me of simulpathity. So there are three, and then a fourth form of meaningful coincidence is seriality, and show some examples of that as we go through. But seriality tends to be about not just mind and environment connections, which synchronicity tends to be. You think of something and it happens out there. Serendipity, you have an idea, and then you get an answer for it in some form or another in a surprising way. Seriality is like seeing 1,000 monkeys over your lifetime, just a monkey symbols. They're objects that other people can also see. So I term meaningful coincidence as an umbrella for those four different kinds of meaningful coincidences. And I hope you notice if you see these words written down, simulpathity, seriality, serendipity, synchronicity, they all begin with an S and end in ITY. Oh, what a coincidence. That's an example of seriality. Well, my journey with this meaningful coincidence thing started when I was about 8 or 9. I was living in Shaker Heights, Ohio, with my father and my mother and my brother. And I was kind of a lonely, strange boy. Um, my parents kind of knew that, and my father knew that I needed a puppy. He knew I needed a puppy. So one day he brought home one. It was what he called a Heinz 57 varieties. Heinz is a food company, and there's 57 varieties of Heinz products. And so this puppy was a mixture of a lot of different versions, but mostly he looked like a Cocker Spaniel. And I love that. I love that puppy. He and I became really good friends, and they let me name him. Well, in a way, he shouldn't have been. They shouldn't have allowed me to do that. I called him Snapper because he liked to chew on the bark of trees. He was teething. So one day I came home on my bicycle from elementary school and pulled into the sidewalk before in front of the house, and my mother was standing in the doorway of the house. And I thought Snapper would be hanging around there, but he wasn't. So I said, "Hey, Ma, where's Snapper? Where's Snapper?" And my mother said something that I don't know why she did, and this is part of the mystery of people and synchronicities. She said, I don't know. Go to the police station. Maybe they know where he is. Being a good boy, listening to my mommy, I got back on my bike and drove over to the elementary school, and then crossed this big street. It's in Shaker Heights, Ohio, named big street that had two lanes on it with a subway with a tram in between. And I'd never been across there, but I knew the police station was across the street. So I crossed the street, parked my bike, and went up the little stairs, and then another little pathway of concrete, and then up some more steeper stairs. And then I pushed open the big door, and then walked in, and there was a big desk and a big policeman standing behind the desk. And I looked up at him and I said, "Have you seen my dog?" He said, "No, he hadn't seen my dog." And as I'm crying now, remembering that, I was so upset because I wanted that puppy. I needed him. He was my best friend. Um, so I went back down the stairs and got on my bike, but instead of crossing the big street, I was crying so much that I just stayed on the same side of the street that the police station was. And I looked up, well, after about riding for 10 yards, maybe 15, I looked up and there was this dog coming towards me. And he was walking like Snapper. Snapper had this funny way of walking with, wasn't right behind him, feet was like the pet back were behind the front in a funny way. And it was that Snapper? Well, we got closer and it was Snapper, and he jumped up on my leg, and it almost like he said, "Where have you been?" Because he was kind of a little bored. Where have you been? So okay, so we just crossed the big street and went home. I made one wrong turn. Snapper, to find Snapper was a right turn. He made four turns from our house. He went the opposite way that I had gone. We made a circle. He had to do four turns to get where he met me. Well, Rupert Sheldrake has written and studied about how dogs know when their master's coming home, and we know stories of dogs finding their way back to where their owners are. I don't know, but I we all have this capacity to know where we need to be without knowing how we get there. And I call that human GPS or internal GPS because Snapper has it too. Birds have it. Cats have it. We have it. So somehow we have experiences where we're able to get to where we need to be following a kind of GPS that we have internally, but we don't know we're doing it. It's a subconscious process that's kind of like radar that locates where we need to be in space the way GPS works in our cars. Well, that was my first experience of a serendipity synchronicity, and they're both because it was so meaningful to me, so important psychologically to me that it made it a synchronicity, but so serendipity that I found them by doing something different than what I usually do, which is way serendipity as well as synchronicities often happen. So I'm going to be going through several of my coincidence stories in this book, and that's one of the first ones, the one with Snapper. This needs to start though with an image generated with AI using Dolly on ChatGPT. And this image is of Carl Jung. And this image of a white older guy with a beard is of standard science, conventional science. And this is a representation of synchronicity. And here is Jung presenting synchronicity to conventional science, trying to say, hey, there's more going on here than you realize. Scientism is a religion, and you've got to be able to break the boundaries of it by thinking as scientists, which means looking for new ideas and just letting the data take you where it goes and not have your rigid ideas that the mind is not separate from the brain. There's something else going on here. And synchronicity is a clue to the realities that we don't know about. The admission that we don't know, that we're ignorant, is very important to keep in mind. It's a kind of humility about epistemology. What do we know? We know that we don't know a lot. And the more you know you don't know. But it's people who get stuck in the rigid ways of thinking, like people believing that Alzheimer's disease is all amyloid deposits in the brain. That's a belief that Alzheimer's researchers have had, but it's not true. There's something else going on, and there's something else going on in this reality that we call Earth, this reality that we live in and don't see through and beyond and around. And synchronicity is one of those clues to how reality works. I used AI to look at my thought patterns and some of the coincidences that appear in the book, the meaning the life-changing synchronicities. And these are some of them. I won't go through all of them, but using ChatGPT to look at my book extracted these ideas about the way I think as revealed in synchronicities. Well, we are all connected in a meaningful way is a fundamental principle of meaningful coincidences. And we're not just connected with each other, we're connected with the natural world around us and with Earth itself. We're not just sitting here by ourselves in our own little islands. And part of what we have to do for humanity now is to recognize our interconnectedness. The coincidences also help me wonder about what else is going on. And mystical is a term for what's beyond here. And I like the phrase that the mysticism of the present is the science of the future. It's kind of a research thing to be able to have a mystical experience or smaller versions of them with synchronicity sometimes is, and then try to see what data you're getting from that to tell you something about how reality works. And one of the aspects of reality that continues to get denied by much of mainstream science is we are energy beings. We got this physical thing, this got a body, I can hit myself in the head. Some guy can hit me on the football field or playing rugby or just something like on the street. We're physical, but we also have biomagnetic fields around us called auras sometimes. But these are not just around us, they're around other people as well. And so these biofields, these biomagnetic fields interact with each other. I go to a lot of dance. It's a kind of a free form dance. And we all know that there's energy being exchanged out there on the dance floor. But walking around in regular life, most people don't know that, but it's still happening. In by nature it means a lot of things, but for me it was like trees. I've had a relationship with 3 trees in a forest 20 minutes from here. I live in Charlottesville, Virginia, And we've had a lot of conversations and we've had a lot of interchanges. And they've given me some good advice and sometimes not such good advice. At least I don't like it, but it turns out to be good advice. Uh, One time they told me to get out of the forest, just get out of here uh, for 6 weeks because you need to be interacting with people more than you are because you come to the forest too much. Go out there and be more social. Well, they were right. I needed to do that. The stories I'm going to tell you from this book, Life-Changing Synchronicities, uh, the ones I'm going to do today are from my time in San Francisco in the late 60s. Now, that was the time of the hippie ascension, and I was an intern at Mount Zion Hospital in 1968 in San Francisco. And I got out there some. I had to be in the hospital a lot. But then I began my residency at Stanford, which was down the road from San Francisco. And I had a 1968 122S Volvo, which is illustrated here in this picture. It's not, it's they got me on the right on the like I'm riding in England, but it's like that's my car, and I'm riding into San Francisco. And there were several times as I approached the city, coming into the city, overlooking that amazing place, overlooking that amazing playground where I knew lots of stuff was happening. I curve into this thing on the Bayshore Freeway, overlooking the city, kind of like this image shows you. And as I curved into this Bayshore Freeway thing overlooking the city, the same song came on 3 different times. So each time I hit the city, this was my welcome uh, on my radio. Crystal Blue Persuasion was the song. It was by Tommy James and the Shondells, and it was pretty popular back then. So I mean, the probabilities of it happening, but happening 3 times when I'm coming into the city is kind of an introduction. I say, hey, wait, okay, synchronicity is happening here. And this image is not very well written, but this is a Haight-Ashbury image, take it made up by Dolly and ChatGPT. So they spelled some things wrong, but I saw a sign once there that suggested synchronicity spoken here, San Francisco in the Haight-Ashbury, and boy, were there a lot of synchronicities in that period of time for me. And back in those days, you had to say when things got overdone, you'd say, hey, don't let me get blown out by all this. Don't let me get blown out by all this. So I was getting blown out by all these meaningful coincidences happening there in the hate. Well, I was on Oak Street. There was a hippie house. It was 4 stories, and a lot of hippies in and out. They were renting rooms in there, and uh, somehow I got in there. I don't remember how, and I was looking for a place to sleep, and I don't know. There was this girl up there in a corner room, and I kind of went in there, and she she pretty much said, "Get out of here. Go to the room down the hallway." And I went to the room down the hallway, and it was the room of Francis, the sextuple Aquarius. Astrology was very big back then, and it is getting more mainstream now. But in San Francisco in the late 60s, it was still kind of within a small culture that was getting talked about a lot. Well, Francis had 6 elements in Aquarius, and Aquarius is very pattern oriented. It's like most of February, And uh, she had her sun, her moon, her rising sign, Mercury, Venus, and Jupiter all in Aquarius. And this illustration is to suggest all the crystalline structures that reflected her mind. You can see, you can see the glasses have diamonds on it, the earrings, all this stuff has diamonds. There's all kinds of crystalline shapes. And Francis had crystalline like glasses, and she exemplified an Aquarius in the way she looked and the way she thought. Well, I was sleeping in her bed and she came up. She came upstairs and I was in the bed. I don't know where she was, but she came up and this is what she wrote. I came up to my bed, just a nest really, and there was a beautiful man curled up in it with black curly hair with a small smile on his face. I wasn't sure he was asleep. I thought he was. Wandering the cosmos, he found me. How does that happen? He made me laugh. So funny, so intensely beautiful. I loved him. I loved being with him when he showed up now and again, which was now and again. She didn't know when I was going to show up, and somehow we ran into each other, and we had a ongoing overtime relationship. But how did I come across what she'd written here? You might ask. I would ask. Uh, I started something called the Coincidence Project to try to get the idea of meaningful coincidences out to the general public in an organized way. And we have a website, and the website needed editing. And Francis was uh, an editor. We needed editing of the stories that people submitted. And Francis had a job as an editor. She contacted me when we had the need for an editor for the stories on our website. So it's one of those synchronicity things. We had a need, and then it got filled. And this is not an uncommon, in fact, a common aspect of meaningful coincidences. You have a need, and somehow from out of where who knows how, the need gets filled. And so Francis and I talked about it. It was like 30 years later, 40 years later, hadn't seen each other in that long period of time. And we talked about those days, and she gave me this description of what it was like for her to come up and find this hippie psychiatrist. I was a first year resident at Stanford at this time, sleeping in the nest of her bed. Well, back in those days, I also got into tarot cards. I had picked up the idea of tarot cards in Los Angeles, being associated with a group that was begun somewhat by Aleister Crowley. That's another story earlier in the book, how I got into that group by a lot of coincidences. Well, the tarot card thing was very interesting because they're kind of domesticated coincidences. They're domesticated because you're doing it right now. You're making coincidences happen right in front of you, where the card reflects what's going on in the person's mind. And this image is more about why do you do tarot card readings? How do they work? I mean, I'm kind of a practical guy. Like, okay, so this stuff does work. I mean, I blew some people out with some of the readings I would do and say, because there's so much of reflection. So how does it work? Well, if you go to the I Ching, which is another version of tarot cards, is where you throw stuff into randomness and meaning comes out of randomness, which is another one of those polarities in this reality here is you can find meaning in randomness. So you shuffle the cards random and then you get some meaning. You throw the yarrow sticks or you throw the coins and you get one of 64 I Ching pages, uh, and that's a form of bibliomancy, but it's still throwing up the random and coming up with something that fits the current situation. So this illustration is of the Tao, the flow of time and energy that is always with us, and that we can join with it or we cannot. And the cards kind of throw up a mirror in the Tao. They mirror what the moment is. And that moment is what's going on between the card reader and the client. It's a mirror, and you can read the mirror. Throwing up the cards, another way of showing their randomness being put into the flow of the Tao. Whatever happens in a given moment, said Jung, possesses inevitably the quality of that particular moment. What's the moment that you're experiencing right now? What's the quality of the moment of now for you? Well, the cards, and not just the cards, but many other things, many other experiences, can reflect the now of now to you. Another way of saying the present is reflected. Well, remember, I was a psychiatric resident at Stanford. I mean, wow, look. And I was going up to San Francisco. I was going up to San Francisco on Wednesday night or Thursday morning and hanging out with the hippies. And then I come back to Stanford on Monday and we have these seminars. And some of the seminars included the residents getting together with one of the attendings. And part of the usual thing was to talk about a patient, sometimes bring in a patient. So I brought in a couple of guys from San Francisco to one of these meetings with the resident and the attending. And one of them was a guy named Thaddeus Golas, who'd written what became a hippie classic called The Lazy Man's Guide to Enlightenment. The Lazy Man's Guide to Enlightenment. Now, Thaddeus had been involved with book companies in New York City and then came out to San Francisco, had enough of all the book bureaucracy, and took a lot of acid, LSD, like, took a lot of LSD, and came up with a lot of mystical ideas and put them together in a little book that was quite practical. He'd go down to uh, someplace near someplace on Broadway in San Francisco, and he'd sell his books. Well, eventually, a publisher picked it up, and a lot of hippies liked it. I also brought down Dickie the astrologer to one of these meetings with the residents and the attendings, and talked about astrology. Yeah, Dickie had his long hair, and he talked about suns and moons and stuff like that. And I thought it was interesting. So one of my fellow residents says, "Hey, Bernie, I'd like to talk with you." I said, "Okay, Bob." So this illustrates going in and talk with Bob. You can see how Bob seems very compassionate with me, and I'm looking down, and he's saying, "Bernie, all this stuff about astrology and tarot cards and mysticism, Bernie, you are psychotic." Now, this is a real problem in current day psychiatry and mental health, is that if you have a lot of synchronicities and talk about them, You're crazy. Part of a benefit of our coincidence project is that we collect people there who, when they tell their friends that they have had a lot of synchronicities, their friends say, "No, I don't want to hear this." Or, "Have you seen a psychiatrist? See a mental health person. Maybe you need some antipsychotics." Well, it's true that psychotics, by people who are manic and some schizophrenics, sometimes see a lot of synchronicities. It's true. I've interviewed a couple of people who have been manic, seen a lot of synchronicities, but really needed standard psychiatric pills to help their mania as well as their depression. But regular people have them too, ladies and gentlemen. A lot of people. And part of my job is to be able to make synchronicity, meaningful coincidence, serendipity much more part of the general discussion. Well, back then, there was like verboten, but I could trust myself because I'd been I'd gone to good schools. Swarthmore College was a good school, and Yale Medical School was at a good school. And here's Stanford too. So I had some reliability and ability to observe. So I was trained to believe that I could see things with some realism. So I've been able to keep going with this. So I'm talking to Bob, and Bob and Bob's father is a reverend of some kind. I knew that. Presbyterian, perhaps a preacher. Um, and I said, "Bob, I'm just trying to do what your father is doing and bring people closer to God." He didn't have anything more to say after that. And that was the end of that discussion. I'm doing what your father does. Your father, I'm trying to help people connect with the divine. Well, another thing that happened at Stanford was that there was a Jungian, a guy wanting to be a Jungian. He's still prominent in the Jungian community in San Francisco. He he did like he was a third year resident. I was a first year resident, and he says, "Bernie, I got something to tell you. Your problems walk into your office." I said, "What?" "Your problems walk into your office." This is a form of synchronicity where what you're dealing with as a therapist is manifesting in the psychological problems of the patients you're seeing in psychotherapy. We were doing more psychotherapy back then than psychiatrists do now. Although many psychiatrists continue with psychotherapy, it tends to be the older ones. So this is to illustrate your problems walk into your office. Well, that, being alerted to that idea got me connected with the idea that it could happen. And it happens. It still happens. I'm dealing with a mother, a father, and their son, and the son is 27, and the son is very entitled. He demands things of his parents. He's unhappy with a lot of different things, and his parents don't put boundaries on him. They don't, they keep complying with him. We keep complying with his wishes, and that only makes him accelerate into kind of confusion and more demanding. So I'm looking at this, particularly the mother, but the father also. I'm saying, this looks very familiar. I was not a father who put boundaries on my boys. I have two sons. They're 42 and 38 now, and they still kind of do what I did with them when they were little, is that I'd roll around on the floor with them and they would hit me sometimes. And their mother would say to me, "That's wrong. You shouldn't let them hit you." And she was right. And I shouldn't. and they still kind of hit me. But my brother, with their words, they get critical of me, but my brother did the same thing to me. And I stood up to my brother, and only about a couple of years ago, stop doing this thing with me where you're putting me down. And then I realized I'm still letting my sons do that. I'm repeating what my father did with me. My father was afraid of me enough so that when I was a teenager, he had to ask my brother to tell me to get a haircut. Well, so I was continuing a pattern of passivity rather than being the lawgiver, the rule guy with my sons. So I'm seeing my problem walk into the office with this mother mostly, but also the father and their son. And I'm saying, okay, so I'm talking to my son a little bit after I realized this, my younger son, and he makes a critical comment to me like he generally does, and I called him on it. And just to make it more fun, I'll say enlightening or educational, I had talked to my older son on my grandson's birthday a couple days ago, and my granddaughter came up to my son while I'm talking to him and said something to him that he didn't like. And he said, if you call me that, I'm going to call you this. So he has trouble putting boundaries on this very adorable 7-year-old. But this is the way he did it. But he puts boundaries on the 11-year-old very well, and also the 7-year-old. And so he's a better rule giver as a father than I am. So I need to copy him and this interaction with the younger one, the younger girl, 6-year-old, 7-year-old, illustrated right there what I need to do with my older son as well. So my problems definitely were walking into the office. It's not just that you have to be a therapist for this to happen. It will also happen in your own life where people out there are reflecting your problems. The environment tends to be a mirror of ourselves more than we realize. It's it's there to reflect back you to yourself if you'll only have eyes to see that. Well, back on Haight Street, I'm back on Oak Street in San Francisco in that hippie place where I met Francis the quadruple sextuple Aquarius. I had this purple motorcycle jacket. Look like that's that purple motorcycle jacket, and I put it up on a bed when I was there on the fourth floor, and then when I went back to find it, it wasn't there. So somebody had swiped it, and I didn't know who. So this is a human GPS story. Uh, I went to a gas station, and there's my car, uh, and there's me looking at this guy who lived in the house with my purple leather jacket. So I threatened him verbally. He backed down, and I got the jacket back. So I ended up where I needed to be to get my jacket back. Human GPS. The probabilities are there, but then it's still improbable to have him be at the same place I am. The city's pretty big. And this will be my last story here, and I got plenty more of them, and you can go to my book to see them. And this illustrates something that I hope you'll pay attention to, and I've alluded to about energy among and between people. It's connecting the singer to the audience. I went out to a dance hall across from Ocean Beach in San Francisco near the south side of Golden Gate Park. Well, the crowd was murmuring at the back of the hall when the band started up, and the female singer started pushing her tune to engage them. And the crowd paid no attention to her as she strained for their attention. So, ever trying to rescue the female, which is another story of a pattern of my life, I stood there watching her, and the people in the back were just like, as I mentioned, just hanging around, looking around, talking to each other. So I tried to connect with her, and I did. She saw me. She saw me looking at her I could feel a connection between the two of us. And that lit up her face. She went into a big smile. And when she started smiling and feeling my connection with her, the rest of the people in the audience came out and the whole thing had started. And I was wearing a purple sweater that my mother had made, and that made me feel really better too. I love that purple sweater that she had knitted. She was a great knitter. We'll have many more stories. As a football thing where I met some guy from high school in Wilmington, Delaware. Uh, we were rivals. His name was Mike Brown, and we ended up on a football field in San Francisco playing touch football, and we were both the major receivers in the game, and they ended up with the score 12 TDs for each of us. It was a great game, but how did I run into Mike Brown in San Francisco, 3,000 miles away, and 12 years later? Well, there's other stories. This is one I'm going to end with. The other major coincidence that happened with me that has influenced what I'm doing here happened in a kitchen in San Francisco in this house. And this house, old Victorian, was across the street from Alamo Square, which had a wonderful view of the city. And in this house, things happened in this kitchen. And now this is a remodeled kitchen. I could have bought the house for 50,000. It's 4 million right now. It's been remodeled, and it's just terrible. I don't like this. I really like the old San Francisco Victorian look. In this kitchen, I came downstairs at 11 p.m. San Francisco time, and I was standing over the sink, and I started choking, uncontrolled choking. I'd never choked like that before in my life. Choking. I couldn't stop it. 'And then it stopped. 11 p.m. San Francisco time. The next day, my brother told me that in Wilmington, Delaware, at 2 a.m. Wilmington, Delaware time, which was 11 p.m. San Francisco time, my father in the hospital bed began choking himself, choking on his own blood. He was bleeding into his throat. My father was bleeding into his throat and died bleeding into his throat. So around the same time he was bleeding and choking, I was choking. He was dying and I recovered. This is what I call simulpathity, that when you can experience the pain of a loved one at a distance, and I did. And I've researched that enough. It happens to a lot of people. There's other people who have written about it. But this and my relationship with Snapper and finding him were the two major contributors to my interest in meaningful coincidences. So thank you very much for listening to my stories. And if you want to hear some more stories, you'll see all of them written in this book, Life-Changing Synchronicities. Thank you very much.